to everyone. A lot of familiar faces, also some new faces. It's great to connect today. It's our info session for our 2 new KIX EMAP learning cycles. Before we go there, a couple of words about the KIX EMAP Hub. The KIX EMAP Hub is part of the Global Partnership for Education, Knowledge and Innovation Exchange Program, which is a joint initiative of the Global Partnership for Education and the International Development Research Center in Canada. The KIX initiative supports the GPE partnership and GPE partner countries with country-to-country learning, applied research, and capacity strengthening of national experts and institutions, all in alignment with the education transformation agenda supported by GPE. The KIX EMAP Hub is one of the elements of the wider KIX program. NORAG, the Global Education Center in Geneva, hosts the hub and works with 36 countries in the EMAP region of Europe, the Middle East and North Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. The EMAP Hub is giving shape to the KIX mission of promoting the use of contextually relevant research evidence for better education policy, planning, and implementation decisions in our partner countries. And the Hub is doing that through its unique approach of surfacing, amplifying knowledge and expertise that already exists in the EMAP partner countries. And the learning cycles is one of the strategies the Hub is pursuing to achieve this goal through its approach of promoting different levels of engagement in different activities for expertise strengthening. We often offer open access webinars and conferences for a large number of participants for peer exchange and knowledge sharing. But we also go deeper on the level of expertise. For a target audience, the Hub is offering skills building activities on priority topics like these learning cycles. Learning cycles are then, as the name states, opportunities for national experts to learn, but also to share and to exchange on topics that derived from priorities expressed via our KIX national teams. Beyond the learning, sharing, and exchange, the learning cycles are also an opportunity to apply the knowledge acquired via the learning cycle into a knowledge report, a policy research piece that can be hopefully useful for policy and planning in each country. Another key aspect of the KIX EMAP learning cycle, which is a concept that was developed by our lead researcher who is here in the room, Professor Gita Kamsi, is that learning cycles are opportunities for those that use knowledge or want to use knowledge, typically people who work in the government, policymakers, and those that produce, mobilize, or advocate for knowledge, those in academia and civil society, to work together in country teams and to co-create relevant and hopefully useful policy research pieces. So this connection between government, academia, and civil society is critical for our learning cycle approach. So at the end of all learning cycles, we expect that the knowledge products worked by country teams can be useful for influencing policy and practice on the specific thematic areas of the learning cycles. All of this in alignment with the GPE support education transformation agenda. This has happened in the past, and I'll give you 3 examples as it happened with the learning cycle case studies of Maldives, Vietnam, or Kyrgyzstan. They influenced policy and practice decisions in these 3 countries. So in our session today, the purpose is to inform about the learning cycle, but also to address any questions, any comments, any suggestions you have about them. We will start the session with my colleague Marina Durufote, KIX EMAP Education Policy Evaluation and Learning Lead, who will present the details of the application process to the 2 learning cycles. After that, we'll have a first Q&A session. This will then be followed by presentations on the 2 learning cycles. We will start by our learning cycle 7. Yes, we are already on the 7th edition of our learning cycle. We are presenting learning cycle 6 and 7. We'll start first by our learning cycle 7, which is on secondary teacher management. And where we are having again the pleasure of partnering with UNESCO IIP and with an excellent group of instructors including our very own Amélie Gagnon, who is lead IIP UNESCO lead on data and evidence, but also Barbara Tournier, leads on education workforce for IIP, Luc Guacanol, co-author of the guidelines on secondary teacher management workforce, and also German Vargas Meza, microplanning specialist. After the overview of the Learning Cycle 7, we'll have a Q&A session. And then we will proceed with a presentation about the Learning Cycle 6. Learning Cycle 6 is on increasing women's representation in school leadership. And we are also very happy to partner with two excellent Learning Cycle instructors, Dr. Fenot Aklog, Adjunct Associate Professor at the City University of New York, and Dr. Catherine Magno, Professor of Education Sciences, University of Freiburg in Switzerland. Following the presentation on Learning Cycle 6, we will have a final Q&A session. So welcome to the session. Let's make this as interactive as possible. And then it's my pleasure to give the floor to Marina for walking us through the application process of the learning cycles. Marina.
Thank you, José. Hello, everyone. So today I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the application process. Let me just make sure that you're seeing my screen when I'm doing that. There you are. So some tips and some general sense of all of the different elements that we are trying to capture through the application forms. Of course, as José Luis mentioned, you'll be hearing more about each of the learning cycles in detail from the instructors today. But first, let me give you a sense of the application process for these two learning cycles. As already mentioned, we have two learning cycles being offered in parallel, and for each of them, the application process is separate. So there is an application form for Learning Cycle 6, and there is an application form for Learning Cycle 7. You're seeing a screenshot of how those two forms look like. So let's go a little bit into more detail on the application process itself. So first, as you've seen, both of these are Google Forms. So the only channel to submit the application is through these two Google Forms that have all of the fields that we need information about for the application process. The form is available in English, Russian, and Arabic. And of course, you're welcome to fill it in one of these three languages. The deadline to complete the form is August 16. So until August 16, we'll be screening all applications. And then, of course, before applying to one of the learning cycles, we do ask for you to read carefully all the information that is available in their respective flyers, because there you have a sense of what the learning cycle work entails, whether this course is a good fit for your work interests, and also whether you have the ability to participate in such an activity. And then one important thing to clarify is that all applications are individual. So it is possible that interested participants identify potential team members, potential individuals in your country with whom you would like to work with in the learning cycle. However, even if you have applied those, it is important that each of the individuals apply separately with their respective information for the learning cycle. So, as I mentioned, the team composition. After we receive all of the applications and we screen them, the Hub will be grouping successful applicants into teams of 3 to 5 members per country. And in that, it's important that you know that we'll take into consideration gender balance. So we want teams to be gender balanced, but also the representation from government, research institutions, and civil society. Ideally, we want all of the national teams to have a good representation from these 3 groups in the country. So now going a little bit more about this selection criteria that I was referring to. So of course, one of the key factors for us is that all applicants need to be residents in one of the 36 KIX EMAP countries. And I ask my colleagues if you can please put the link to the list of KIX EMAP countries so everyone in the room can see what are these 36 countries. So this is a criteria for us because of how the hub works with this particular group of countries. And also, we are looking into participants that their work closely relates to the topic of the learning cycle. So it is about how relevant this learning cycle is to your work. In relation to that, we're also looking for participants who have a strong motivation to contribute, sorry, there, to choose there, but a strong motivation to contribute to the country work on the topic of the learning cycle. So someone that is closely related to the topic and also that has a strong motivation to contribute to advance that topic in the country. And then, of course, there are some criteria that we're looking at as well. Whether the participant has access to the data required for participating in the learning cycle. You hear more about it and you also be able to read about it in the learning cycle flyers, but for each of the learning cycle, there are different types of data that you need to be able to engage with the learning cycle work. And then, of course, we're also looking for commitments with some key aspects of this type of activity. One is a commitment to participate in the online sessions. So all of these course sessions are online. So we need participants to be available to participate in all of that, and also to work in parallel with their team members on a knowledge product. And that is related to the last point, which is the commitment to produce a policy-oriented knowledge product according to the requirements of each learning cycle. So that for us is also important, that applicants are committed to the production of this knowledge product, and of course that they have the availability to do so. As for us, it is very important that you're able to participate in the sessions, but also that you're leaving these sessions at the end with a knowledge product that will influence policy dialogue in your country. Now, going more concretely into the application form, I'll give you a brief overview of the different fields that we have and what we're expecting to see in each of those. First, just general personal information. It will be asking for full name, email address, the gender, job title and organization, but also organization type. This will help us with seeing the different categories of organizations that are applying to the learning cycle. And lastly, of course, the country, as is an important criteria for us as well. Again, that applicants are from one of the KIX EMAP countries. Then, as I mentioned, even though the applications are individual, and it's important that each interested participant is applying individually, it is possible that you have already identified potential teammates. In this case, we ask that you list their names in these fields. So you'll be able here to identify each of them, and we'll be taking that into consideration when assessing, but keeping in mind that we are looking again for teams of 3 to 5 members per country that are gender balanced and also that have a balanced representation from governments, research institutions, and civil society. Then we'll be going a little bit more into the topic of the learning cycle. So we want to understand whether your experience relates to the learning cycle topic. So this will be specific for each learning cycle. In the case of learning cycle 6, we'll be asking you how your education work experience is linked to increasing women's representation in school leadership. And in the same manner, for learning cycle 7, we'll be also asking about your education work experience, but how it's linked to secondary teacher workforce management. We're also interested in getting your perspective on what do you perceive as the key challenges in each of these areas. So key challenges in ensuring women representation in school leadership in your context, and also key challenges in secondary school teacher supply and management in your context. So this will give us a sense of how close you are to the topic and how your work relates to it. And then we're also interested in your sense of how this learning cycle could contribute to your future work. And this, of course, we're talking about you as individuals, but also about the contribution that you want to make to your education system. So please let us know in these fields, how is it that this learning cycle could be contributing to your work and your education system. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the access to the required data for each of the learning cycles is also important. You have this question in both of the application forms, and you also have a reference to what exactly this required data is. You see the links in the respective forms, so we'll need you to look into whether you have that access or if you would need further support with getting that access. And in the case of learning cycle 6, we have an additional question that is whether you have the skills to work with the data. So we're asking about basic numeric calculation skills, so you're able to also analyze that data as you're performing your learning cycle work and preparing your knowledge products. Then we come to the commitment parts that I mentioned earlier as part of our selection criteria. So the commitment to the course and its output is very important to us. So we'll ask you whether you are available to regularly meet with your team members during the course period and for the number of hours that is established for each of the courses. And as well, we'll ask you whether you have read the details about the knowledge report that we expect as part of this learning cycle, and whether you'll be able to comply with the knowledge report requirements. So for these, again, it's very important that you refer to the learning cycle flyers, because in both of them, you'll be able to see an outline of the expected knowledge products and whether this is something you would be able to contribute to in the case you are selected for the learning cycle. And then we're also looking into two additional questions. One is, of course, we ask that you submit your short curriculum or resume. So this will help us in also understanding your experience, your profile, so we can make the best choice for each of the national teams that will participate in the learning cycle. And lastly, we're also asking you to indicate your language skills. For this, please note that this doesn't make a difference on whether you're selected or not, but we just want to understand if the participant is able to follow the course in English, or if they would need interpretation into either Russian and Arabic, which are the languages that we'll be able to offer interpretation for in both of these learning cycles. So again, this is not a criteria. If you need interpretation, please let us know, and we'll take that into consideration for the planning of the learning cycle. And lastly, we'll be asking you, how did you hear about the learning cycle? So a very simple question, just to help us in understanding what are the most effective channels for our communication. So the form is a little bit long, as you've seen, but it stops here. And I want to encourage all of you, after hearing about the learning cycle sessions, if you think this is a good fit for your work, that this can contribute to what you're already doing, to submit your application by August 16. And yes, please keep in mind all of the details that I have just shared, and also that the following presenters from the learning cycle will share with you as well. Thank you.
So, Marina, and we have already a couple of questions here in the chat, but I would like to encourage everyone to continue including their questions, their comments anytime during the session. I will start here by one that was already responding in the chat, but I think it's important that we respond also orally to everyone. Marina, if you can address, there were questions. What are the standards that make countries included in the EMAP Hub? Why do we have some countries within our list of 36 countries? The link was shared in the chat. So if you can just give an overview of what makes a country a KIX EMAP country, a GP KIX EMAP country.
Sure. So you have probably heard the brief introduction from José Luis in the beginning that the EMAP Hub is part of the KIX program. And in the KIX program, GP partner countries are divided into 4 different hubs. The EMAP Hub is mandated to contribute to education systems of 36 countries. That's why we have this specific list. These are GP partner countries. So that's why they are eligible to participate in our activities. But of course, there are other activities from other regional hubs that other countries are welcome to participate as well. So just to make the difference, and you can see in the list whether that is whether your country is one of the EMAP countries, or maybe your country is part of another KIX hub.
Yeah, I think that's very clear. So it really depends on the decision that is made by GP, and then GP will communicate to us in terms of our hub. Marina, we have a lot of questions when we were talking about where is the application link, where are the, just for you to tell that we will be sharing the chats. There's a link, there's a news item that have, if you want to address this, and also, yeah, if you want to address this, if I'm posting the question, there is one. Go ahead.
Sure. So yes, we'll be sharing all of the links, both the learning cycle flyers that I was referring to and also the application forms. We encourage you to stay on with us and listen to the presentations from the learning cycle instructors, because this will give you a very good sense of what these learning cycles will cover. So at the end, you can then take your time to read through the flyers and the application forms accordingly.
So I'm going back here to a question that is related to the countries, and it's a question from Lebanon. And maybe it's easier that I address this, because I was checking this, the links sharing in the chat. There is a representative from Lebanon asking that we share 2 links. And in one of the links, Lebanon is considered a partner country, and the other is not. So I think the confusion here is that Lebanon probably is now listed as a partner country as for GPE within the GPE website, but it's not yet within the KIX EMAP Hub. So conversations are ongoing. All of the countries that are now listed within the GPE websites will be in the near future members of the hub. At this moment, Lebanon is not yet a member of the hub. We hope that there are changes to this, but at this moment, Lebanon is not yet a member of the hub. This is what we can confirm. There is then another question from another individual, a point that you raised, but I think it will be good to emphasize. Does it require individual application, or a team can apply for the learning cycle? If you can re-emphasize this point.
Sure, it does require individual applications. Even if you have identified potential team members, potential people that you'd like to work with in the learning cycle, we ask that each individual submit an application, and you have a specific field in the form where you can say, who are these people that you would like to work with in the learning cycle? And of course, we'll be looking into that when considering the different elements of the application as well. But please make sure that each individual is submitting a separate application.
Yeah. Then we have specific questions. There is a question here from a colleague in Syria that says, I'm a teacher in a private school from Syria. Can I join to learn more? This is the question. If she's asking if by being a teacher in a private school from Syria, if she can join the learning cycle.
Unfortunately, Syria is not yet one of the KIX EMAP countries, so that will be a problem. It doesn't have to do with your particular role in the country, but the request for this learning cycle that we can only incorporate countries in this list of 36 EMAP countries. So of course, we are looking forward, as José Luis mentioned, to having other countries in the region, such as Syria and Lebanon. I see the requests as well, participating in our future learning cycles. But also to mention that this is one type of activity that we have, and we do need a selection process for this one because we have a limited number of seats, but we have a lot of other types of activities in which we encourage the participation from countries, from neighboring countries in the region, such as Syria, Lebanon, and others. So please keep an eye also in other activities that we are offering, and we hope that in the future we can also accommodate participants from Syria and Lebanon in the learning cycles.
Sure. A couple of more questions, because questions continue to roll, and we can also address some of the questions via the chat. So there's a question from Vietnam, and I think this is an interesting question. So the question is, because he's mentioning in the question that there is a minimum of 3 people, and asking if we need to have 1 individual from government, 1 from academia, and 1 from civil society representatives. Can we have more than just 1 from government, from academia, from civil society? And then as a follow-up also, can an individual working for an international NGO also apply?
So on the first question, of course, it's possible that teams have 2 governments, 1 civil society, 1 research, or 2 or 3. The design will differ in each country, and that will have to do with the relevance of the team composition. But we're looking to have representation from the 3 groups. So ideally, these 3 groups are represented, even if it's not an equal number for each of the representatives. And then, what was the second question, Jose? Sorry.
The second question was if someone working for an international NGO
yes.
would apply. Yeah.
Yes. So members of international NGOs and also international organizations working in the country are welcome to apply.
We have here a question from a member of the steering committee in Pakistan, asking, I'd like to know the role link of the national coordinator, national steering committee with these learning cycles. I think basically is to ask, this is not in a question, but I will try to interpret the question, ask if the steering committee national coordinators can apply to the learning cycles, and if there is a role of the steering committee and national coordinators also during the selection of teams, etc. If you can address this question.
Sure. So national coordinators and national steering committee members are more than welcome to apply. If the topic of the learning cycle is relevant to the work you're doing, we strongly encourage you to be applying. And also we count on your support in identifying those in the country that are relevant, that are the most suitable to participate in these learning cycles given the topics they are addressing. So we count with your support on that too. In terms of the selection process, we will be reaching out to the national teams to support us with the validation of the national teams that we'll be selecting. So of course, there will be a longer screening process that is happening with all the applications that we receive, but we'll count with the national teams in validating, making sure that these are the right people to contribute to the topic of the learning cycle for your country.
Sure. Let me just complement that we actually encourage steering committee members to join, to apply, national coordinators as well, especially those that are working at system transformation grants, working with GP, working within the ecosystem that GP is supporting at national level. So more than encouraging our encouragement to them to apply to these learning cycles. There is a question, Marina. I think this is a couple of quick questions that we can proceed with the session. Can someone apply for both learning cycles?
Yes, you're welcome to apply for both learning cycles if both of them are relevant to the work you're doing. Of course, we will choose just one of the learning cycles. If you're a suitable participant for one of the learning cycles, we won't be able to secure participation in both learning cycles, especially because they are happening at the same time concurrently. So yes, just keep that in mind that even if you apply for both learning cycles, you won't be able to participate in both at the same time.
Yeah. Marina, 2 final questions, but there are so many that it's interesting questions. There is one question asking, I think there's someone that has joined recently our hub activities. How many learning cycles do we have? Learning cycle 1 to 5, what are they? So a little bit of an overview on that.
Sure. So we are now at learning cycle 6 and 7. These are the 2 learning cycles that we'll be offering starting from September this year. You'll be hearing more about them soon. But in the past, we organized 5 learning cycles, and you can see more about them in our website. Maybe one of our team members can put the link, but they address different topics. But basically, we're numbering them because these are the ones that happened in the past. So the hub started its work in 2020. So from 2020 until now, we have conducted 5 learning cycles so far.
And that's it, Marina, because we'll have now also some questions. Who are the instructors? What are the details of the course? And I think it's a good time for us now to give the floor to our course instructors. And Amelie is now laughing, so it's a good time to give the floor to Amelie. And just to say that all this session, people are saying that they joined late. The session is being recorded. We'll be sharing the recordings with everyone that registered. This will be being made publicly available on our website as well. So what you haven't got in the session, you'll be having the opportunity to see the recording again and also to contact us. There will be also, we'll be sharing our hub contact details so that you can reach out to us at any time. And now I give the floor to Amélie Gagnon, our instructor for Learning Cycle 7. Amélie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Привет, marhaba. It's a pleasure to be here today with you. And thank you to the KIX team, to Gita, to José Luis, to Marina, for everyone to allow us to be here again. It's the 3rd learning cycle that we are facilitating with the KIX program. And so it's an honor, it's a pleasure, and we're very excited to be together for this learning cycle. In the room, I have some of the facilitators of the course. So Barbara Tournier, that was mentioned a bit earlier. She's our specialist working on teaching workforce and education workforce in general. We have Germán Vargas, who's also a microplanning expert, and myself. I'm a demographer. I'm managing the team that works on data and evidence. And we have also Luc Yacugnol, and so he's he left IIEP recently, but he's the co-author for the guidelines that we will present and use during this learning cycle. And he's an very committed and expert in educational planning. What I prepared to discuss and to present to you today is a bit of the, what we're going to address in this learning cycle. But first, before I even start talking, I want to tell you that this learning cycle will be a very interactive, very dynamic. We really count on your participation. So just to test how participating you are, I want to start by asking you, why do you think we need to focus on secondary teaching workforce management nowadays in our education systems? So don't hesitate to use the chat and put some ideas over there to say like why this learning cycle is so important at this point in time in our countries and our education systems. Why do you think it's relevant for you? And why do you think in more general terms, this comes at the right point in time? So please use the chat if you want to give some ideas. It's also a test to see how interactive we can be with Zoom. I let you 5 or 6 seconds to go to the keyboard before I can give you some of our perspective at least. All right, so I'll go ahead by telling you that, if we look at the let's say history of international and national commitments and the evolution of education systems in general, we know that our systems have been expanding horizontally. So more and more people, or the greater proportion of people, can get into education in different proportions. But we also have systems that have been expanding vertically. So we started with, primary basic education, secondary, now tertiary, university, and postgraduate degrees. And so because of these movements, lateral and vertical movements, we've been, in every country, I think we've been experts in planning and managing primary education workforce management. But as the graduation, or as the learners have progressed from primary to secondary, well, it's the same thing with teacher management, right? We need to go further and be more proficient in allocating teachers and selecting teachers, training teachers, and making sure that every secondary education level student has the right person in front of them. I see some of the responses in the chat. That's perfect. Improve education quality, better deployment. Teachers are backbones of the education system, that's for sure. And we focused a lot on primary education. That's really true. Someone in Bangladesh said that we focused a lot on primary. Now it's time to focus on secondary. That's absolutely right. And you know, there's someone also that pointed out the effectiveness of leadership and managers, and so that's key to our concerns. And you're all right. Education, secondary education is much more complex than primary education, especially for teacher workforce management. There's a lot of complexity related to the scheduling, to the subject expertise, and also because of the workload is also different at secondary level and than primary level. The subject specialization, the schedules, and to be honest, there's very little accessible guidance right now on how to manage secondary teaching workforce better. And so that's why we worked on this, and that's why we are proposing this learning cycle. The secondary teaching workforce management is one of the most important budget posts in any system. Teacher salaries are extremely important in an education budget. And we know that this topic is, of course, pushed by national agendas. Someone mentioned also further to EFA. Now we're getting to secondary, so we need to expand our teaching workforce for secondary. And also this topic is pushed by the SDG 4. So either internationally or nationally or even locally, this topic is very relevant and very important. So we hope that we can support you in building or expanding your capacity in secondary teaching workforce management. What we are preparing for in this very practical learning cycle is that by the end of this learning cycle, you will be able to understand major challenges of teacher management at secondary level, and we will make sure to contrast it with primary education mostly, but also a bit with tertiary education. You will be able to apply methods, quantitative methods, to project teacher recruitment needs. You will be able to diagnose issues relating to supply, allocation, utilization of secondary teachers. And up. You will be able to develop or design evidence-informed policies, strategies, and practices for the management of secondary teachers. This and much more. We want this course to be extremely practical, so we will make sure that we can support you with tools and also like spreadsheets, templates that you can use for the learning cycle, but also in the future of your duties. We prepared an outline based on around 5 weeks of training, let's say. Week 1, the thematic area is challenges in secondary teacher management and how to establish the demand for secondary teachers. Second week, we're going to look at secondary teacher allocation and looking at how we can make a good diagnosis, so then we can prepare for the future. Third week, diagnosing teacher utilization. So this will look at workloads, different subject matters, and how to really make sure that we can have a clear picture of what type of teachers we need where and when. Fourth week, we're going to focus specifically on secondary teacher management policies and strategies. So building on the diagnosis that we will have made, we will see how we can put that into recommendation and strategies and policies that we can design for our ministries. The last week will be all about you. It will be about you presenting the work that you will have done so far in the course. And we will also be there to coach you to finalize the knowledge reports. Every week, we will build, on the theory, we will build on your expertise, but we will also give you all the kind of practical tools. We mentioned Excel spreadsheets so that you can really use your own data, your own staff and teacher data, and create these projections, create these allocation models and utilization models so that you can really feed into your knowledge report with this real life data that you will be using in the practical exercises. Now, this is like a thematic outline. If we look at the actual calendar, we have prepared these 5 weeks around a longer time. So for the timeline itself, we will start with an inception on 16th of September. This is the inception, let's start the beginning of the course. We will actually give you all access to the IIEP online campus. So this is a platform, a training platform that we use, and you will be able to connect over there, look at the materials. You will download the guidelines on secondary teacher management that we're publishing right now. And you will be able to introduce yourself to participants and, get acquainted with the platform and how it works. Week 1, it will be our first, I would say, I was about to say in person or face-to-face meeting, but it will be online, of course. So our first online meeting on the 24th, it's a Tuesday. And we will meet twice a week. So on the Tuesdays and on the Fridays. So that week 1, you remember we will talk about the challenges and how to project the demand for secondary teachers. So we will do that in week 1. We will then have the second week, 1st and 4th of October. During that week, we will work on diagnosing secondary teacher allocation. And after these 2 heavy weeks, a very intense week, you will have a kind of study break. So we'll have 1 week to kind of make sure that you are on time, that you can do all the the exercises. And if you have any questions, we'll be there to answer your questions. We will be able for one-on-one coaching. So everyone will have access to IIP team during the study breaks. Third week, or fourth if you look at the calendar, but the third week of training, 15th and 18th of October, we will work on the teacher utilization. Week 4, we will then work on secondary teacher management policies and strategies. And then you will have, again, another study break. So it will allow you to catch up if you get a bit late. It will help you to also focus on the exercises, fetching the data that you need to work on the models. And of course, accessing either me, Barbara, Haman, or Luc if you have any question or if you need extra support for your use case or your knowledge report. Then the 5th week, everybody will join for a last live session, 2 last live sessions, sorry, where everyone will have a chance to present their work. So you will tell us a bit more about your country. You will tell us about what you did in the analysis, what you found out, and what you think could be good recommendations for your own system to implement in regards to secondary teacher management. And then you will have some time. We will be there to coach you, to give some advice, to give you extra resources until the end of November, where you're expected to hand in your knowledge report. So this will be the last chance to, perhaps add a few things, maybe correct a few things, and maybe also to take into account some of the comments we will have made during the week 5 presentations. And the scenario for every week, every training week will be the same. On Tuesdays, we will focus mostly on, professional development, sharing materials, giving techniques, sharing experience and practices from around the world. And on the Fridays, it will be more about professional exchange. So in the perfect, KIX spirit, about exchanging your experience, reacting to each other's contributions. And also we will try to give the floor to specific participating teams where they will be able to come in and present one special policies that they implemented. We might have guests also that will come and share experiences so that we can really take advantage of being all together and sharing experiences in all of our contexts. And voila, this is us. So I invite colleagues to wave a hand so that you can see them in the room. We will be very happy to work with you over the 10 weeks that are spanning through the course. And I will be happy to answer your questions if you have them right now. But I can only recommend you to join us for this exciting learning cycle that we will be giving starting in September. Thanks a lot. And to you, Marina.
Thank you, Amélie. Thank you for the great presentation. I've seen from the engagement in the chat that's certainly a topic with a lot of interest. Participants were sharing the relevance of it and different challenges and opportunities for it in their context. So already quite some engagements going on in the chats. In terms of questions, we didn't receive that many, so I do encourage participants, now that you are able to hear the presentation, if you have any particular questions on the contents, on the format of the learning cycle, please go ahead. Amélie is here to answer them. So let me start with the first one that we received, which is how many hours participants are expected to spend in the learning cycle?
Well, it's kind of expected on our side that we spend about 2 hours on Tuesdays, about 2 hours on Fridays. So I would say about 4 hours. In some learning cycles, everybody was so engaged and motivated. We even stayed like an extra half hour sometime just to kind of finalize and share more. So I would say between 4 and 5 hours live sessions. And of course now after that, there's the teamwork. So depending on the team, on how close you are to one another, how you can easily access data from your MS or from other data sources, this can depend. But we would expect that, let's say, maybe 1 or 2 really committed hours as a group after the sessions per week. That would be awesome. So I would say about maybe 6 hours per week. I think this fits the general setup of the learning cycles. Of course, some teams prefer to do more. Some teams can only do less, but we try really to support every team to the best of their capacity and availabilities so that they can draw something from the learning cycles. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. So more questions started coming up as you're speaking. So let me start with one from Sajid Ali in Pakistan, who is asking whether the content will deal with both public and private sector management of secondary teachers. And he mentions that in Pakistan, there are 30 to 40% secondary schools managed by the private sector. So that's the reason for the question.
Yeah. Sajid, it's really nice to see you again. I recognize some of the faces and the participants from previous learning cycles, so it's great. Thanks for the interest. Bon, indeed, when we plan for an education system, right? Of course, some contexts have public, private, semi-private, non-public, as we call them sometimes. So some aspects of the training will indeed apply to all types of schools or subsystems, especially if we think even about just like the training of the teachers, regardless who they recruit, who recruit the teachers, there's this kind of reflection that we will share on how to train the teachers. But of course, it will be much more I mean, all the techniques are applicable by anyone who plans for their system. So if we can imagine a consortium of private schools, they can also use the techniques. So the logic is the same. It's just that the application will be done by one sector or the other. I'm looking at Barbara to see if she wants to add something. But the technique themselves are kind of agnostic, I would say. And Barbara, would you like to add anything?
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, good.
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, I think most of it's about like logical steps and approaches to how you do projections, how you diagnose teacher allocation and utilization. So it really depends on the data that you have available. For the projections, you start with how many students you have in the system and therefore how many teachers you need to have at the end too. So I think this will certainly apply to both public and private. And then for diagnosing utilization and allocation, this will depend on the data that you have available. But certainly if you have the data for the private sector, for the teachers, then we can do it. And also what I wanted to add maybe is for those, it would be the best is if you have access to your EMIS data, because then you can work on your own data and the knowledge report will be really, applicable to your country. But for those who have difficulty in doing that, we will try to have a mock data set available.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a really important point. In many contexts, access to the private sector data is very difficult. So that might hamper the capacity to really dig into the issues of the private sector. Thanks, Fama.
Welcome.
Thank you both. So we have received also some questions related to the knowledge reports. And I would invite, so we hear from one of our participants, I would invite Natia Pirashvili. She's the KIX EMAP coordinator in Georgia. So Natia, I see you have a question regarding the recommendations that will be prepared in the learning cycle reports and who is responsible for preparing that. So if you want to address this question, please.
Thank you, Maureen. Yes, I'm Natia Pirashvili, Georgia, National Coordinator of KIX EMAP. Yeah, my question is that these final reports will be elaborate some recommendations for the countries, will be the policy document. And I think that some regional community schools are going to participate here these learning cycles. So it will be there's some opportunity for teachers to elaborate some recommendations for the national ministries of education. I just wondering how what you see the design of the final reports. Kind of design will be, yeah.
Thank you for asking. So in the brief, Marina, I'm sure that you circulated all the documents already, but they will be probably circulated again. What we provide in the brief, you will see at the end, is kind of a suggested outline for the knowledge report. And the outline of the knowledge report kind of follows the structure of the course, which is basically how to do a kind of diagnosis of your teacher management for secondary in the country. So you will do like step-by-step, analysis of the situation, like what you have so far in terms of, availability of teachers, their capacity to teach different subjects, how many people you need to recruit and deploy and so forth. And so building on that diagnosis that you will do every week, you will be able, indeed, at the end, the last week, to think about policy recommendations. And depending on your context and your access to data, you will be able to focus on saying, hey, the data tells us that this should be an area for support, or that aspect should be strengthened. And so this indeed will be able to do. So anyone who participates will be able to look at the data, do the exercises based on the course, and then provide recommendations. Of course, the learning cycle takes place in a very unique environment, right? We're not policymakers, we're not elected officials. So the recommendations that we will be able to make, the ideas for strategies will be only based on the data that we have access to, and the outline of the course and the tools that we have in the course. So of course, it will be just on that basis, but they will definitely be a interesting foundation to start discussing. One aspect that we will put the emphasis on in the course is also to, of course, look at national level information, but the importance also to look at subnational level, looking at region to region. What's the difference? Even if you can go district by district, depending on the data and the time that you have. And so looking at these regional, subnational disparities, perhaps with other breakdowns like language of instructions and things like that, this will help you also to have more like fine-tuned recommendations. So yes to your question.
Thank you, Amélie. Thank you for clarifying that. So I see that are also other questions. Participants are worried where they will have access to the application form, to the recording of this meeting. Do not worry, we'll share all of those with you, the links towards the end of the session, and the recording a few days following the session. So you also have access to this resource if you want to go back to the points that Amélie presented and the questions as well. So with that, I suggest we move to hear a little bit about our other learning cycle, but thank you very much, Amélie. And I hope you're able to stay with us a little bit if other questions come up. Thank you.
So let's move to our learning cycle 6. And I invite our instructors, Fenot Taklok and Catherine Magno, to please take the floor and guide us through the overview of the learning cycle 6 on increasing women's representation in school leadership. Fenot, please go ahead.
Very much. Hello, everyone. It really is a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Jose Luis, Marina, Gita, Allison, and the whole KIX EMAP team for the opportunity. We are very excited to introduce the Learning Cycle 6, which is entitled Increasing Women's Representation in School Leadership. Next slide, please. So Jose Luis introduced us, but my name is Fenot Taklok, and I am from the city University of New York. I'm also the Director of Research and Evaluation at the Bank Street College of Education in New York City. And I will be one of the instructors for the course, along with my colleague, which I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Vinod. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. I'm Catherine Magno. I'm Professor of Education Sciences at the University of Fribourg in Fribourg, Switzerland.
Great. Next slide, please. Right. Catherine, you're on. You're on mute.
Okay, we'll begin with the topic and objectives of the learning cycle, which you can see generally here on the slide. The course focuses on the critical issue of increasing women's representation in school leadership. We know that the professionalization of school leadership is emerging as a critical focus in school systems around the world. And some scholars even say that we're in a golden age of educational leadership right now. We know that the effectiveness of school leadership directly impacts student achievement, student outcomes, as well as school culture, and other aspects of systemic school improvement, as well as individual teacher improvement. And that directly connects to the other learning cycles. So I think we see a little bit of overlap here, which is nice. And so what we want to do in this learning cycle is not only discuss the importance of school leadership and how school leadership renders itself more effective, but focus on the representation of women who are, of course, numerous in the teaching force, but are much less represented in the leadership force in educational systems. And we also know that research shows women to have when they're in leadership positions, especially important decision-making positions, they have a particularly positive impact on education of girls especially, but all students. And we want to look at why and how they're underrepresented in these roles. So the learning cycle will enhance participants' understanding of the importance of women in school leadership, first of all. We'll talk about barriers and opportunities for recruiting, developing and retaining women in the roles of school leader in various positions within schools. We'll explore policy interventions and practices from different educational systems that are aimed at overcoming barriers to women's advancement in leadership positions, so that pipeline through leadership, and to cultivate a professional network of experts for knowledge exchange, collaboration, and strategy development focused specifically on the representation of women in school leadership. And then we'll move on to the course format on the next slide, please.
Actually, 2 slides. Next slide, please. But before I get into the next slide, I'm very curious if in the chat, if you can mention if you have ever had a female woman school leader in your entire educational experience. That would be wonderful to have some insight into that from the participants here. And while you're doing that, I just want to talk a little bit about the actual format of the class. So this learning cycle will run for 10 weeks, beginning on the 18th of September and ending on 29th of November. And then we've added some, optional additional time from 6th of January to 28th of February 2025. This is just opportunity for the teams and the instructors to continue consultation to finalize the knowledge product. The course will be conducted in English with simultaneous interpretation available in Arabic and Russian. So as participants with the instructors, we will meet 2 times per week over the course of this 10-week period. And we'll be engaging in both on and offline activities. And I'll just go through sort of what the 4 core activities are. So the first are these, instructional sessions. These are online synchronous 90 minutes class sessions where all participants will be engaging in instructor-facilitated discussions about the core content, any assigned readings for the course. And then in one of these instructional sessions for the course, we will actually convene a panel of women in school leadership roles currently and experts as well in the field to just provide participants with insights, real world insights into the challenges and the opportunities and pathways to the school leadership role for women through their own experiences. The peer knowledge exchange, which is sort of the a very sort of common structure across all the learning cycles. Again, this is 90-minute synchronous sessions. You'll be organized into clusters of either 2 or 3 country teams. We'll meet for synchronous sessions, 90 minutes. And the aim of these sessions is to sort of create a very rich and highly interactive peer learning environment where you as participants, have the opportunity to contribute and receive very substantial value from the sort of collective experience, such as discussions that reflect on the weekly thematic content, opportunities to share and compare your own country's specific challenges and opportunities related to women in school leadership. Third is this team collaboration time. So during the intervening weeks, between these instructional sessions and knowledge exchange sessions, as country teams, as members, you will sort of work on collaboratively on submitting sections of the draft knowledge product. And we will give you sort of interim, the process will be scaffold. So we'll be giving you sort of interim guidance on how to do that. And also during that same week, intervening week, Catherine and I will schedule a 1-hour sort of coaching and facilitation and meeting time for each country team to provide support and feedback on your knowledge product as you are developing them. Next slide, please. That's it. Is that you or me, Catherine? I can't remember.
That's me. I think you've covered a lot of that actually in the previous slide, but this lays it out in terms of the course schedule, which officially begins with an introduction and orientation on the 18th of September. And then following that, sessions will be held twice a week on Wednesdays and Fridays for about an hour and a half from 11:30 to 1 p.m. Central European time. So the key dates then, we have the 18th of September, which would be mandatory for the orientation. And then between the 25th of September and the 29th of November are the weekly sessions. And then from the 6th of January until the 28th of February, we're going to give additional team consultations with us so that we can support your final project development of the knowledge product. So maybe we can move on to the next slide. And we're expecting that participants will not only participate in the synchronous online sessions, but also meet with their teams outside of the class, to collaborate on the work, exchange with each other, and prepare for our sessions. The total estimated time commitment is approximately 60 hours over the course of the entire learning cycle. That includes that time in January and February to refine the product. And maybe before going to the participant profile, which is the next slide, I can just summarize what I'm seeing in the chat, which is really interesting. I'm seeing multiple people saying, yes, they've had female school principals, and that's really interesting and wonderful news. And what I think will be especially interesting is to have the teams exchange. So those participants who have not experienced female leadership and do not see that as a trend in their country would be able to learn from and exchange with participants who have, and we can talk about what facilitates that and what are barriers to that participation, and also at what levels. So, and the kind of preparation for leadership that women experience versus perhaps men, and other issues that might come up. And I don't know if Anat, you'd like to say anything about that. You take it from the next slide.
Sure. Yes, I've been looking at the chat, and this is really, really fascinating. And it'll be interesting collectively to, first of all, understand not just nationally, but subnationally, and whether there is disproportionality, and also for the countries that have representation and women in leadership, to understand some of the potential, the policy option, the and policies and regulatory frameworks that sort of allow women to advance, and some of the challenges as well. So next slide, I just want to reiterate the participant expectations. Marina covered a lot of these, but I just want to sort of go over them again. Again, to be a participant in this course, you need to be a resident of one of the, I believe it's 36 GPE KIX EMAP countries. And then this course is really designed for the educational professionals, either at the mid-level or senior level, whose work really focuses on school leadership in general, and or gender equity and inclusion. In terms of the resource that you have available to you, obviously it'd be really important to have, a computer with reliable internet and video streaming capabilities, and access to your national education management information system or other national database from which you will be able to extract and analyze data on representation of women in school leadership. At the national and subnational level, this can include analysis of disproportionality of women in school leadership, comparisons, between urban and rural and other divisions. And then, of course, as a participant, we hope that you would be very highly motivated to complete the course requirements, including regular attendance in the class meetings and collaboration with your country team members on developing that knowledge product. And the participants who meet those requirements and are able to submit their finalized knowledge product will receive a certificate of completion from NORAG. And then I'll turn it over to Catherine, who will discuss the structure of the knowledge product, which is a policy brief.
Mm-hmm. The policy report then that the participants will develop is a 3,000 to 4,000 word policy brief on women in school leadership within the respective country context. And so for those of you who do not see as many women in school leadership, this gives you a lot of room for thought about how that might take place. For those who do see women in school leadership positions, we would probably want to look at more nuanced aspects and intersectionality, and again, policy options, what is currently enshrined in policy, what is not. So the policy brief will include several sections, and as Vinat mentioned earlier, we'll talk about each one of those sections and have you turn in a draft of each section along the way, so you won't be doing all of this at the end. But the first section is the research evidence overview, where you will be synthesizing research, highlighting the importance and benefits of women in school leadership. Secondly, we'll talk through school leadership policies and pathways, and you'll present a short discussion of national policies in your context and frameworks related to school leadership. The third section will review women's representation in leadership roles, including the gender gaps you see. Fourth section is the analysis of the barriers and enablers of the recruitment, development, and retention of women in these leadership roles. And then the fifth section are policy recommendations. So your suggestions for increasing women's participation in school leadership roles, or some nuanced version of that, certain types of roles or at certain levels, for example. And lastly, areas for further exploration that you will identify along the way for future analysis. I think that sums it up. Fanat, last
slide, please.
slide.
So again, to conclude, we do believe that this learning cycle will offer sort of a valuable opportunity to sort of deepen your understanding and share your knowledge and contribute to actionable policy solutions for women in school leadership. And we hope this overview has provided you with a clear understanding, and we are now happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yes, so thank you so much, Fenot and Catherine, for giving us the overview of the learning cycle. We are now more aware of what are the contents, what will be the schedule, etc. We have some questions about the application and who can apply, if people can. There is a question that I think is the most popular question, is if one can apply to both learning cycles. Just to make sure that it's clear, so people can apply to both learning cycle. They will only be selected to one. And of course, the selection will be made according to the criteria that we are stating. There is a very interesting question now here from Nazrim Siddiqa, our colleague from Bangladesh. She asks, will this leadership consider the female parents, the leadership that you will be addressing in the learning cycle? Will this leadership consider the female parents and community female leaders who play direct vital roles in schools, or will it be limited to school heads, leader teachers, and other administrators? So if you could clarify the scope of the leadership.
Catherine, you want to take that?
Yeah, I needed to be unmuted. Thank you for that. I would say that we're open. I think depending on the context, leadership takes various forms and involves various groups, whether it's organizations outside the school, community groups outside the school, collaboratives. We have to consider all of it. I think we don't see school as a closed entity, but rather a permeable institution in community. So I think my answer would be yes, we would consider those forms. And that would depend on the context as to what's relevant and what we would bring in. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Fenot, would you like to add something or not?
No, I completely agree that we would be very much open to that, and we would encourage you in your application to propose any ways in which you're thinking about school leadership and the context and ideas that you have, if it is beyond the sort of traditional school leader role. So absolutely, completely concur with Catherine on that.
Sure. And so we don't have any more specific questions about the learning cycle, let's say, but more reflections. And I think the reflection came after you were asking which countries or which people had examples of contexts where they had a female who was a school leader. For sure, there were a lot of people that were silent that did not have examples of women that were school leaders. And there was an interesting reflection from our steering committee member in Bhutan, Kinley Sedan. And I invite Kinley, our steering committee member in Sedan, in Bhutan, to share her thoughts and her comments she had, so that you can also reflect on that, Fenot and Catherine. Kinley, please join us and share your thoughts based on what you had in the chat, please.
Not as like in Bhutan, especially at my college, when we want to apply for leadership, especially women, when they want to apply for leadership, it's the other woman pulling the woman who wants to apply in the leadership position down. So I would like to hear your thoughts on this.
Thank you, Kinley. Fenot and Catherine, would you like to react?
Well, my response to that is and the strategy that's really sort of taken off, at least in several countries that I know about, is this idea of creating communities of practice among leaders, right? To sort of foster that networking and mentoring role. And that the leaders who advance into that position sort of see their role to bring other women up rather than prevent them. My question back to you would be, what are the structures and policies at your institution that could help create that kind of environment and culture and practice, and dismantle this practice that you're saying is happening, that women are sort of preventing other women from advancing? That would be my sort of response to that. Catherine, do you have anything to add to that?
Sorry, I have to keep requesting unmuting. I don't. I think that that's a good point that Fanat raised, and I think the networking is huge, a huge factor for leaders across sectors, whether it's in education or outside of education. Networks create opportunities for advancement in career, and I think women in general have not been afforded the opportunity to network with each other and with others to strengthen those and open those opportunities in the same way that other groups have, especially men. So that's the same in education systems, and it forces women to make difficult choices when they are in decision-making positions among alliances and among groups. And I think these communities of practice and other forms of networks for women become really important, and they can be built into structures in different ways through policy, but we don't often see that. So that's something that we'd like to talk more about.
Sure, and maybe an opportunity also to address this via the learning cycle and also continue the knowledge exchange exploration during the learning cycle sessions.
Absolutely.
There is here a question that asks, again, regarding the scope of the learning cycle, if elements of researching and looking at school leadership, women's representation in school leadership, also in contexts where have been affected by climate, have been affected by emergency contexts, if that's something that can be also a context to research on, and to if you can react to that.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Sure, I'll start and say yes, absolutely. I think we have to consider all forms of environmental impacts on education in general. School leaders, educational leaders at all levels need to address any kind of crisis situation that's happening in their context. And so we would be, of course, very interested in the kinds of issues that are affecting schools locally for all of you, and want to learn more about those situations in particular, and think together and across the network about how to address them specifically, and particularly the kind of impacts on women in those crisis situations, and then as a consequence, women in leadership positions. Yeah. Fanat?
I 100% agree and concur. I literally don't have anything more to add to that. I think you explained it very concisely.
Okay, we are reaching the end of the session, but there are two comments that I want to address here before we close. There is, from Sajid Ali, our coordinator in Pakistan, asks about what is the nature of knowledge product for learning cycle. I think he says 7, but I think it's 6, because he's addressing other question. And then our lead researcher, Professor Gideon Kamsi, is asking for, I think it's more than a question, is more like a comment. In the context where there isn't really an issue with school leadership, but there is still an issue with the lack of female teachers at upper secondary schooling, that is creating a bottleneck for female students to advance. Probably the learning cycle could cover that reality, and the teams could focus on the the bottlenecks, preventing female teachers at upper secondary schooling that then create a subsequent bottlenecks for female students in advance. You are nodding, so I think it's yes. Especially in, and Gita was mentioning, especially in gender segregated secondary schools. So I think that's a yes. That's an option people have also to address that in the learning cycle. And if you could just quickly respond to what is the nature of the knowledge product for learning cycle 7, you address that in the presentation, but if you can just quickly address that.
For 6 or 7? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, I said 7, but it's 6 for 6.
So it's a policy brief would be what the knowledge product is, organized in sort of 6 components in which we will provide some of the research evidence to date on women in school leadership sort of globally, examining different policies and pathways to the school leadership position in general, and frameworks related to that, addressing potential, depending on the who are participants, we will obviously tailor this, but we would want to look at, disproportionality, however that is. So if it's disproportionality, and we have a lot of participants in countries where there are segregated schools, where there is, high representation, maybe disproportionality looks different. Maybe it looks at female representation at the secondary teacher level. And then really looking deeply within your country context, what are the factors that serve both as opportunities and potential barriers for the recruitment, development, retention, and school leadership. And then based on that, the actionable policy recommendations that you may have based on the theme of your policy brief for addressing and improving participation in leadership, however defined. I hope that helps. I hope that clarifies.
Yeah. Katrin, do you like to add something? Or because I see here there is another, I was saying that they were the last questions, but we have a final question. And it's a question from a colleague from Timor-Leste that mentions that in Timor-Leste, school leadership positions have traditionally been dominated by males. However, there has been an increase in females taking on leadership roles lately. And evidence shows that schools tend to be more organized and improve when led by females. Would you consider presenting comparative studies or research regarding female and male school leadership? And then
that will be week 1.
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
We're discussing actually the emerging evidence on that and comparative research studies on exactly what was stated about that, about the differential impacts of having female versus male leaders.
Okay. Fernand and Katrin, thank you so much. We'll move now to the closing of the session. Before I share a couple of words, just to mention that there were a lot of participants from Palestine, from Jordan, from Lebanon, asking, we are not yet KIX EMAP country. What will happen? Can we apply? We will check what is happening with the status of your countries joining the hub, and we'll let you know and flag, and hopefully this situation will change and you will be able to participate. So we will be sure to keep this communication open, and as we have your emails, we'll be sure to communicate this with you. So as we move to the end, I'd like to thank all of those that joined today, all of those that are interested in our learning cycles and have made this a very much an interactive session. Thank you as well to our learning cycle 6 and our learning cycle 7 instructors. You gave us a wonderful overview of what's to come to our 2 new learning cycles. Thank you as well to the whole KIX EMAP team here in the room today, that your effort made this session happen. And some final notes. So all the information that we were sharing today is available in our website, and the links will be shared in the chat. And we will be sending an email to all of you with the direct links as well in your inbox. I'll ask my colleague Veronica to screen share also the flyer, an example of, for each learning cycle, the KIX EMAP Hub with the learning cycle instructors produced a learning cycle flyer where you have detailed information about the contents of the flyer, the time commitments, the knowledge reports. If you can zoom in a little bit. So this is the example of one. And these learning cycle flyers, they are in English, in Russian, in Arabic. So you have here the full details, the objectives, the course formats, all in written, the expected time commitment, as you are seeing now, the course schedule for both learning cycles. And then if you continue, the instructors, this is the example of learning cycle 6, the participants' eligibility, how is the application with the specific links to the application forms. And then very important, what we were discussing. At the end, we want the learning cycle to be useful, and we wanted to have a product that can be useful for discussions at national level. So both learning cycle flyers have as an appendix the structure of the knowledge product that we aim to have as a result of the learning cycle. So final reminders on the deadline. The deadline is on the 16th of August. So we have more than 1 month to mobilize teams to make sure that we have a lot of good and relevant applications. Maybe you will have more questions, so you can use our Nora KIX email address, and the link will be and the information about the address will be included in the chat, so you can contact us at any time with questions through our Nora KIX email address. We also want to know how we did in this session. So before that, we are screen sharing. If you can go to the previous slide, we were screen sharing this QR code. You will go to the news item that has all the links, application forms, learning cycle flyers. They are there for you to see it, for you to save it. Then we also want to know, if you go on to the next slide, we also want to know how did you find this session? What was good, what was not so good, so that we can keep learning to do better and to better respond to your needs. So we want to hear from you. Thank you so much all for joining. Our KIX journey in the EMAP region is just starting. Thank you all.